In 1947, a 71-year-old woman in the Ozarks grew 43 varieties of tomato from seeds she had saved since before the First World War. Not bought, not ordered, saved. In jars her mother had used for the same purpose. That woman never spent a cent on tomato seed in her life. Her method is number 7 on this list. Number 19 was used by sharecroppers across the Mississippi Delta who could not afford to buy seed corn every spring, and it outperformed the commercial varieties they were told to replace it with. Number 4 was so effective at producing free, permanent squash harvests that a major seed company filed a patent claim on a variation of it in 2003. A patent on something grandmothers had done with their bare hands for 300 years. These 25 techniques are not gardening hacks. They are acts of food sovereignty that an entire industry spent decades trying to bury. If you are not subscribed, now is the time. Subscribe and stay. This is the kind of knowledge that does not come back once it disappears. Number 25. Fermentation seed cleaning. Tomato seeds, a jar, water. That is all. You scoop the seeds out of a ripe tomato into a jar, add an inch of water, and leave it on the counter for 3 days. A layer of mold forms on top. That mold is not rot. It is a biological process that strips the gelatinous coating off each seed, the same coating that prevents germination in the fruit. After 3 days, you pour off the mold, rinse the seeds, and dry them on a paper plate. Those seeds will germinate at higher rates than anything in a commercial packet. Appalachian families did this every August with every tomato variety they grew. The whole process costs nothing. A packet of hybrid tomato seeds costs $4 to $6 and produces plants whose seeds cannot be saved reliably. Fermentation cleaning produces seed that is true, viable, and yours. Forever. That is the part the packet does not mention. Number 24. Dry seed harvesting from bean pods. Beans. Left on the vine until the pods turn brown and rattle when shaken. That is the entire method. You pull the pods, crack them open, and pour the seeds into a jar. No processing, no treatment, no equipment. Families across the rural South saved pinto beans, black-eyed peas, lima beans, and pole beans this way for generations. One plant produces enough seed to plant a full row the following year. A pound of dried bean seed at a garden center costs between $4 and $9. A single plant left to mature produces that pound for free. A woman on a fixed income in eastern Kentucky told an oral history project in 1983 that she had not purchased bean seed in over 40 years. 40 years of food, from one decision to let a few pods dry on the vine. Number 23. Potato eye banking. You do not need a whole potato to grow a potato. You need an eye. One eye with a 1/4 inch of flesh around it. That is a viable seed potato. Families during the 1930s would eat the potato and save the eyes. They cut them out, let the cuts dry for a day on a windowsill, and planted them directly into compost or straw. Every eye becomes a plant. Every plant produces 6 to 10 potatoes. Certified seed potatoes sell for $3 to $5 per pound. A single potato from your kitchen produces 8 to 12 eyes. Your great-grandmother did not buy seed potatoes. She ate dinner and planted what was left. Number 22. Winter squash seed saving. Butternut, acorn, Hubbard. You eat the squash, you save the seeds, you rinse them, spread them on a towel, and let them dry for a week. That is the full process. The seeds store for 5 to 7 years in a cool, dry place. One butternut squash contains between 200 and 400 seeds. You need 6 plants to feed a family for a winter. Open-pollinated squash varieties breed true from saved seed. Hybrid varieties do not. That distinction is not an accident. It is a business model. Every hybrid seed you buy is a seed you must buy again. Number 21. Lettuce bolt seeding. Most gardeners pull lettuce when it bolts. They call it ruined. Their grandmothers called it next year's crop. When lettuce bolts, it sends up a tall stalk covered in tiny yellow flowers. Those flowers produce seeds, hundreds of them per plant. You let the stalk dry, shake it into a paper bag, and store the bag. One bolted lettuce plant produces enough seed for 30 feet of row planting. The seed is free. It is perfectly adapted to your soil, your climate, your exact growing conditions. A packet of lettuce seed costs $2 to $4 and comes from a field 1,000 miles away. The bolted plant in your garden is closer, cheaper, and better, but nobody sells what they cannot charge you for. Number 20. Corn seed selection by ear. Before hybrid corn existed, every farmer in America saved corn seed. The method was specific. You walked the field before harvest and identified the healthiest stalks, the tallest, the most disease-free, the ones with the fullest ears. You marked those stalks. You harvested those ears separately. You hung them in a dry barn over winter. In the spring, you shelled those ears and planted the kernels. This was not casual. This was selective breeding performed by working people with no degrees, no labs, and no funding. They were developing locally adapted cultivars through observation and patience. It worked for 10,000 years. Then the hybrid seed industry told them to stop, told them their own seed was inferior to what came in a bag with a corporate logo on it. Within 2 generations, most of that farmer-bred corn was gone. Here is a pattern break. Here is where things get structural. The hybrid seed industry did not outlaw seed saving. It did something more effective. It made seed saving pointless. Hybrid seeds, the ones labeled F1 on every packet, are crosses between 2 parent lines. The first generation performs beautifully. The second generation, grown from saved seed, falls apart. Yields drop. Traits scatter. The plant no longer looks like what you planted. That is not a flaw. That is the design. It ensures you come back to the catalog every spring. The global commercial seed market generates over $60 billion annually. That number depends on one thing, that you do not save your own seed. Every grandmother who dried bean pods on her porch was a threat to that revenue stream. Not because she was a radical, because she was self-sufficient. Those 2 things became the same problem. Number 19. Open-pollinated corn preservation. The sharecroppers who could not afford hybrid seed did not stop growing corn. They kept planting open-pollinated varieties, Bloody Butcher, Hickory King, Pencil Cobb, and selecting the best ears every year, just as their fathers and grandfathers had done. The yields were not always as high as the hybrids in a perfect year, but they were consistent. They required no purchase, and the seed improved over time because it was being selected for the specific soil, rainfall, and pest pressure of that exact piece of ground. A farmer outside Greenville, Mississippi, grew Hickory King corn on the same 40 acres for over 60 years using nothing but his own saved seed. His per-acre yield in the 1990s matched the county average for hybrid corn without ever buying a single bag of seed. That is not a story the seed industry tells at conferences. Number 18. Pepper seed drying. Cut a ripe pepper open. Scrape the seeds onto a plate. Wait a week. That is your seed stock for next year. Bell peppers, cayenne, jalapeno, poblano. Every open-pollinated pepper variety can be saved this way. The seeds remain viable for 2 to 4 years. One pepper contains between 50 and 300 seeds. You need 6 to 12 plants for a household supply. The math is not complicated, it is embarrassing. Embarrassing because it reveals how simple self-sufficiency actually is, and how thoroughly we were convinced it was hard. Number 17. Garlic clove replanting. You do not buy garlic seed. Garlic does not produce true seed in most climates. You plant cloves. One bulb of garlic contains 6 to 12 cloves. Each clove becomes a full bulb. You harvest in summer, save your largest bulbs, and replant the cloves in fall. That is a permanent garlic supply, forever. A single bulb of organic seed garlic costs between $3 and $8 at a garden center. A single bulb from your own harvest, replanted, replaces that purchase every year for the rest of your life. Your grandmother did not have a garlic bill. She had a garlic patch. Number 16. Melon seed saving with sun drying. Watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew. You eat the fruit. You rinse the seeds. You spread them in the sun for a week. They dry hard and store for 5 years. One melon produces between 200 and 500 viable seeds. A packet of 10 to 15 seeds costs $3 to $5. The ratio is not a rounding error. It is a revelation about how much free abundance we throw into the compost bin every summer because nobody taught us to keep it. Number 15. Sweet potato slip growing. You do not plant sweet potato seeds. You grow slips, small-rooted shoots, from a sweet potato you already have. Place the bottom third of a sweet potato in a jar of water on a windowsill. In 2 to 3 weeks, green shoots emerge from the top. When the shoots are 6 inches long with roots at the base, you twist them off and plant them in soil. One sweet potato produces 8 to 12 slips. Each slip produces 5 to 10 pounds of sweet potatoes. A single grocery store sweet potato costs 70 cents, produces enough slips to yield 50 to 100 pounds of food. Families in the rural South grew their entire sweet potato crop this way, every year, from their own harvest. No catalog, no order form, no middleman. Here is a pattern break. Here is where things get personal. Every method on this list is free. Every one of them works. Every one of them has been performed by millions of people for hundreds of years, and yet most people under 50 have never heard of any of them. That is not an accident. That is the result of a system that profits from your dependence, not your failure, your dependence. There is a difference. Nobody failed to learn these methods. They were removed from the curriculum, removed from extension bulletins, removed from gardening magazines funded by seed and fertilizer advertisers. The knowledge did not die. It was defunded. And the people who still carry it, the elderly, the rural, the stubborn, are treated as quaint instead of essential. Number 14. Onion seed harvesting from flower heads. When an onion overwinters and sends up a flower stalk in its second year, most gardeners pull it. They consider it a loss. It is not a loss. It is a seed factory. That single flower head, a round globe of tiny white blossoms, produces between 200 and 800 seeds. You let it dry on the stalk, cut it off, shake the seeds into a bag, and store them. Those seeds grow onions. Your grandmother did not buy onion sets in plastic mesh bags from a hardware store. She let her strongest onions bloom. Number 13. Saving seed from biennial root crops. Carrots, parsnips, beets, turnips. These crops do not produce seed in their first year. They store energy in their roots. If you leave them in the ground over winter, or store the roots in damp sand and replant them in spring, they flower in their second year and produce thousands of seeds. One carrot plant, left to complete its full life cycle, produces enough seed to plant a 100-foot row. This method requires only one thing the modern gardener has been trained to avoid: patience. The 2-year cycle does not fit a system built around annual purchases. That is why you were never taught it. Number 12. Herb seed collection from dried flower heads. Basil, cilantro, dill, parsley, fennel. Every one of these herbs produces seed if you stop cutting it and let it flower. The seeds form in clusters at the top of dried stalks. You cut the stalks, hang them upside down in a paper bag, and wait. The seeds drop. You store them. One basil plant produces enough seed to plant an entire herb garden the following year. The herb seed industry is worth over $1 billion annually. Its entire revenue model depends on the assumption that you will buy new seed every spring instead of letting last year's plant finish its job. Number 11. Seed storage in glass jars with desiccant. Mason jars. Dried rice or powdered milk as a moisture absorber. Seeds sealed inside, stored in a cool, dark place. That is a seed bank. Your grandmother's pantry was a seed bank. Properly stored, most vegetable seeds remain viable for 3 to 10 years. Tomato seed lasts 4 to 7 years. Bean seed lasts 3 to 5. Squash seed can last 6 or more. A family saving seed from 10 crops, stored in 10 jars on a single shelf, holds between 5 and 10 years of planting stock at all times. The cost of that shelf is the cost of the jars. The security it represents is beyond calculation. Number 10. Hand pollination for seed purity. A paintbrush. A small paper bag. Morning light. That is the equipment. You cover an unopened female flower with a bag to prevent insect pollination. When the flower opens, you use the brush to transfer pollen from a male flower of the same variety. You recover the female flower. The fruit that develops carries seed that is pure, true to the parent variety, uncontaminated by cross-pollination from neighboring plants. Squash growers in the Appalachian Highlands did this by hand for generations to maintain variety integrity. No lab, no genetic testing, a paintbrush and a paper bag, and the understanding that purity matters. Here's a pattern break. Here is what the system does not want framed this way. Seed saving is not gardening. Seed saving is independence. It is the difference between renting your food supply and owning it. Every time you buy seed, you are leasing the right to grow food for one season. Every time you save seed, you are removing yourself from that transaction permanently. The economic implications of widespread seed saving are enormous. If even 10% of home gardeners in the United States saved and shared seed from 5 crops, the home garden seed market would contract by hundreds of millions of dollars annually. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is arithmetic. And it is the reason this knowledge sits in the memories of old people instead of in the pages of mainstream gardening books. Number 9. Seed sharing through community libraries, a cardboard box, envelopes, labels, a table at the local library or church. That is a seed library. You bring saved seed in labeled envelopes. You take what you need. You return seed from your harvest at the end of the season. Seed libraries operated informally in farming communities for centuries. In the 2010s, several states attempted to regulate them under commercial seed laws. Pennsylvania's Department of Agriculture issued a cease and desist to a seed library in 2014, a cease and desist for sharing free seeds in envelopes at a public library. The regulation was eventually softened after public backlash, but the impulse behind it was clear. Free seed sharing threatens commercial seed distribution, and what threatens commerce gets regulated. Number 8. Seed swaps at the kitchen table. No organization, no library, no formal structure, 2 neighbors, a kitchen table, a handful of envelopes. One brings pole bean seed, the other brings cucumber seed. They trade. Both walk away with 2 crops instead of 1, and neither spent $1. This was not a movement. It was Tuesday. It was what people did before seed catalogs arrived in the mailbox and before garden centers anchored every strip mall. The swap was not just economical. It was social. It was a reason to sit together. It was trust made tangible. Here are my best seeds, given freely, because your garden feeds your family the same as mine feeds mine. That act cost nothing and built everything. Number 7. The jar method for long-term tomato seed banking. The woman in the Ozarks, the one from the opening, her method was this. Every summer she selected her best tomato from each variety. Not the biggest, the best, the one with the best flavor, the fewest blemishes, the healthiest plant. She fermented the seeds, she dried them, she placed them in small glass jars, labeled with the variety name and the year. She stored them in her root cellar. Each jar held 3 to 5 years of planting stock. She rotated, she refreshed, she never ran out. Over 60 years, she maintained 43 varieties without purchasing a single seed. Her root cellar held more genetic diversity than most commercial seed catalogs. That was not an accident. That was discipline. That was someone who understood that seed is not a product, it is a responsibility. Number 6. Letting volunteers grow. A volunteer is a plant that grows on its own from seed dropped the previous season. Tomatoes that sprout in the compost pile. Squash that appears at the edge of the garden. Dill that comes back where it stood last year. Most modern gardening advice tells you to pull volunteers. They are in the wrong place. They disrupt the plan. Your grandmother did not pull them. She let them grow. She understood that a plant that chose its own location had already selected for the conditions it needed. Volunteer plants are often hardier, more pest-resistant, and more productive than anything transplanted from a pot. They cost nothing. They require no effort. They are the garden choosing to feed you. Pulling them is not tidiness. It is refusal. Number 5. Saving seed from the strongest plant, not the first fruit. Commercial seed production prioritizes uniformity. Home seed saving, done properly, prioritizes resilience. Your grandmother did not save seed from the first tomato to ripen. She saved from the healthiest plant, the one that survived the dry spell, the one the beetles avoided, the one still producing in October. She was selecting for toughness, for local adaptation, for survival. Over years, this practice produces a strain of seed uniquely fitted to your soil, your climate, your specific pest pressure. No seed company can sell you that. It does not exist in a catalog. It exists only in the patient, repeated act of choosing the strongest and saving what it gives you. Here is a pattern break. Here is the thing nobody says out loud. The industrial seed system did not just replace seed saving, it replaced a relationship. When you save seed, you are in a relationship with your land. You are observing it, you are responding to it, you are building something that gets better over time. When you buy seed, you are in a transaction. Transactions end, relationships accumulate. The difference between a gardener who buys seed every spring and one who saves it is the difference between renting and building equity. One has a garden, the other has a legacy. And legacies are not profitable for anyone except the person who holds them. Number 4. Perpetual squash growing through buried fruit. Take a whole squash, butternut, acorn, delicata, and bury it 4 inches deep in a compost-rich bed in late fall. Cover it with mulch. Walk away. In spring, the fruit decomposes underground and the seeds germinate in a cluster. You thin to the strongest 2 or 3 plants. Those plants produce squash. You bury 1 squash from that harvest in the fall. The cycle never ends. No seed packet, no seed starting indoors, no grow lights or heat mats, a buried squash and time. This method is so old and so effective that a seed company attempted to patent a variation involving pre-composted seed plugs in 2003. They tried to own what the soil does on its own. Number 3. Seed drying on the stalk. The oldest method, the simplest. You do not harvest the plant, you leave it. Beans, peas, corn, sunflowers, herbs, lettuce, radishes, all of them will dry their seed on the stalk if left alone. The plant does the work. It pulls moisture from the seed, it hardens the shell, it prepares the next generation for storage and germination. All you do is wait, then collect. This requires no tools, no skill, no knowledge beyond the willingness to not pull a plant out of the ground the moment it stops looking pretty. The entire modern gardening aesthetic, the clean bed, the tidy row, the end-of-season cleanup, works against this method. Beauty and productivity are not always the same thing. Your grandmother knew that. Number 2. Passing seed to the next generation. Not a technique, a practice. A woman in West Virginia kept a coffee tin of half-runner bean seed on the top shelf of her kitchen cabinet. When her daughter moved to her own home, the first thing that woman gave her was a handful of those beans in a paper envelope. Not money, not furniture, beans. That envelope contained a food supply that would renew itself every year for the rest of that daughter's life. It contained a connection to the land her mother had worked. It contained proof that you do not need to buy your way into self-sufficiency. You inherit it. You pass it on. A handful of seeds in a paper envelope is not a gift. It is an inheritance. It is the most practical form of love that exists. Number 1. Saving seed at all. Not a specific crop. Not a specific method. The act itself. The decision to look at a plant that fed you and say, "This will feed me again." The decision to keep something instead of throwing it away. The decision to trust the process that sustained every human civilization before this one. Saving seed is the oldest agricultural act. It predates written language. It predates currency. It predates every institution that now tells you to buy what your hands can produce for free. A single person saving seed from 5 crops becomes independent from the commercial seed system within 3 years. Within 5 years, they hold enough genetic diversity to sustain a household garden indefinitely. Within a generation, they hold a living archive of varieties adapted to their specific place on Earth. That is not gardening. That is sovereignty. That is the quiet, stubborn act of refusing to let someone else own the first link in your food chain. Your grandmother did not call it that. She just called it putting seeds by. She did it every year. She did it without thinking. She did it because it was obvious. It is still obvious. We just forgot. This week, save 1 seed from 1 thing you grew or bought or ate. Put it in an envelope. Write the name on the front. Put it in a drawer. That is the beginning. That is the whole thing. Everything else on this list grows from that single act.